later.
Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, bell. You have a bell. Thanks, Jim. Tonight, Richard and I are going through our program, and we're looking at the difference between evaluation and judging. What are the qualities of a good judge? The duties of the judge. We'll look at the judging criteria for 4 competitions, even though we're only doing 2 this year. This is judges training for all 4. We'll look at specific judging topics, judging a test speaker, and that is SASSY, and that'll be your opportunity to put your knowledge into practice. And then we'll have a debrief where we can talk to you about what features you liked about SASSY speech. So SASSY, I know you are an accomplished Toastmaster, you've got broad shoulders, and then we'll have any other questions that you might ask. Richard, anything else from you at this stage?
No, I think that's fine for the first slide. It sort of sets the program up for us, you know. The thing for me is the difference between evaluating and judging. I mean, we could do a workshop on evaluating and tell you why it's not critiquing, but in the same way, judging and evaluating or evaluation are 2 different animals. In the case of an evaluator, as you can see from the little boxes here, the information is against the topics, or the information provided against the topics illustrates the differences between those 2 tasks. In the case of an evaluator in a club or wherever, you're giving a person encouragement, some sort of feedback, that sort of stuff on their speech, encouraging them to keep going and developing themselves. In judging, we have a set of straight rules. There is a rule book, and you'll be getting the link to that. That book sets out very, very clearly the way that contests should be conducted, and we would urge anybody taking up judging or interested in delivering judging or being a judge, be it chief judge, regular judge, tie-breaking judge, whatever, to be familiar with those rules. I'd say they're probably compulsory reading if you want to do a half-decent job or better. To me, I think everything's on the page is said. You can read that just as much as I could, so I don't think I'll read that to you. You will be getting those slides, but I don't think there's any confusion there between the 2. Be it the parameters all the way down through to your justification. One point in terms of the justification there with the judges, we do have a judge's ethics form that you would sign, and we will cover that later. The thing is that you don't have to explain. In fact, you shouldn't be challenged or asked to explain by anybody. We will cover the aspects later of a protest. If there's a protest, who can and who can't, and what should be done in the case of a protest. Other than that, that's it. You don't give an opinion. You don't give feedback. Theoretically, the chief judge could give a person some feedback on request, but why would they? They're not evaluating the speech. So this is one difference. If a person is to have their speech evaluated rather than judged, that would have to be arranged with another person who's not in the judging group, and would be done independently, whether it's area, whatever.
And Richard would have different criteria anyway as well.
Absolutely. Each contest has its own set of judging criteria, and we'll work our way through those with you as we go through the night. That's right. We're not putting in a full day. We're only going to midnight. Okay. Show ding or dong.
Or ding dong.
Oh, well, that was the ding, and that's the dong.
So what are the qualities of a good judge? You know,
Mm.
they're following up ethics, as Richard has mentioned, and not revealing the conversations or their own thoughts about the judging. So to be a chief judge, voting judge, or tie-breaking judge, and we'll discuss each of those in a moment, you must meet all eligibility criteria as listed below. So at a club contest, you need to be a paid member. At area, division, or district, you must be a paid member with a minimum of 6 months membership. You can't just, join and a month later, regardless of how accomplished you are as a speaker, then be eligible to judge. Have completed a minimum of 6 speeches in the competent communicator, or have earned levels 1 and 2 within the Pathways learning experience. Now, only members who've joined Toastmasters prior to the rollout of Pathways can apply speeches from the Competent Communication Manual and be eligible. So if you joined some time ago and you've got, say, 4 speeches done in the old Competent Communicator, but then Pathways came in and you started on that, put a couple of speeches in there, then you would be eligible, even though you haven't done 2 levels, because you can count some of your Competent Communicator. But you also need to be physically present for the competition in which you're judging. So, I mean, that's a bit of a no-brainer, really. So, ding dong.
Ding.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel powerful. Yes, we do have a code of ethics, and we actually have a form that we sign, our pledge and our oath and all that sort of stuff. We are not biased in any way, and that's things to think about is that you might not be particularly fond of the material or the subject of a speech, but that is not up to you to decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's up to you to look at the speech and judge the speech on its merits. Albeit, I'll qualify that by saying there is judging to a point on appropriateness. So if something is truly inappropriate, well, that does come up. Although not in the way that you might think appropriateness. It's really a matter of tailoring it to the audience, the type of language the audience can cope with, or you would normally use, that sort of thing. But bias itself, no. I'm not going to pick a guy over a girl, or some other non-binary person to be a winner. And likewise, the topics and subject matter are not to be critiqued by me according to my own personal predilections and preferences. At the time that we are judging, we are not aware of the timing of the speech. Normally the lights are invisible to the judges. The idea is to, again, judge the speech on its merits according to the criteria that will be set down. Disqualifications, well, we can cover that at some point, but basically there is a span, like a target thing for set for all of our speeches normally, as in your manual speeches, where you might go 5 to 7 minutes. 5's nice and green. You might qualify for you might not be disqualified if you are under or over, as long as you are not under or over by, say, 30 seconds, and that's rigid. So that's not known to the judges at the time they judge. In fact, it is not known to any judge but the chief judge until an announcement is made at the end.
And on that, Richard, so
yeah.
what Richard's saying in the Code of Ethics is that if you are listening to a speech and think, oh, I think that's gone over, and you might subconsciously think, oh, well, I'll mark them down because they're going to be disqualified. But you don't know. I mean, they might have crept in by 1 or 2 seconds, so that could be okay.
Yep. Well, that's right. Besides, you don't know whether you had a stroke during. You might have had a mini stroke and just not measured time properly anyway. Whereas the timer, let's hope, is not in a vulnerable state. We follow as I said, the contest rule book. There is a contest rule book, and it's updated every year. We have a 2021 rule book available online. Enough said for the moment. And we don't reveal our participation as a judge or any of our scores given. In fact, the chief judge doesn't. If I'm a judge, a voting judge, my chief judge will not be aware of what my scoring method was, because that's my personal stuff. There is a certain degree of subjectivity in this because we are all people, and they are my opinions against the criteria. And how I did it and how I came to my conclusion are not up for judging, unless there's something really strange and there might need to be a bit of a debriefing as to why things might have swung some way, just to assure that bias wasn't there, and also the fact that people might have missed something. But it's nobody else's business how I did or didn't do it. And I have my ding.
Yep. Okay, so the qualities of good judges, and these are actually barriers to being objective, because there is a degree of subjectivity. And so some of the concepts, position of the speaker. And I know some judges may think, oh, if you're a first speaker, I've got to mark you down because they don't want to be locked in high at the top. But if you do mark them further down, you need to then use them as a benchmark so that any subsequent speaker is measured against them according to the criteria. If they're better, you give them a better mark. If they're not as good, you don't give them as good a mark as what they did. So there can be a misconception that, oh, if you're a first speaker, you will be marked down. Oh, you'll win if you go last because what you hear last is what works. So I hope you're not talking about me there, Charmaine, that I know all. So it's about being objective. It's about marking according to the criteria, but keeping things relative. So then you've got another barrier, which is helping the underdog. And that concept in Australia is that, we have a natural leaning to support someone who's struggling. Think back to the Sydney Olympics. Like, we've just celebrated the 20th anniversary. And so at that at the swimming events, we met Eric the Eel. Now, he captivated all of Australia. And so we gave him a lot of support because he was the underdog. You wanted to see him do well. So, but in our judging, what you do is you don't give people extra marks because you feel they're the underdog. Another one could be, oh, I've heard that speech before. That person's competed in this event last year and used the same speech. So you've got to put that aside. You mark it according to the day. Now, if you are judging and someone speaks and you think, oh, I know Charmaine's a brilliant speaker, so I'm going to mark her. Oh, yeah, she hasn't done as well today, but I know that when she goes to division, she will blitz it. But you mark them according to that performance on that day, which comes into another part, which is, gives someone else a chance. Because in certain events, you might find that the same person or the same 2 or 3 people get first, second and third is, they always get into those positions at area level. And so you might think, I've got to give someone else a go. No, you're giving a judging on the criteria for each speaker. So sometimes if we see an unusual creative speech, that can actually work in 2 ways. That's creative, I'll go with that. That's really good. I'll give them extra marks. Or, I don't follow that. That's too left field. And that's aligned with, of course, with biases and prejudices, particularly about the topics, and your own personal preferences. I like that topic. It's aligned with my feelings. No. What you need to do is be objective, mark each individual speech against the criteria that's there and in relation to the other speakers. If I can just digress for a few seconds, because sometimes when I run this as a face-to-face, people will say, I've got my marks all about 95 down to 83, but theirs are way down. They're 77 to 55. That doesn't matter what figure you place onto the speaker, as long as you've got your relativeness between them, because you can often find that people will mark, to say, I'll just pick one. Denise has been a judge and she may have given Richard 89, and then she's given John 85, whereas Jim's given those two 76 and 69. That's not a drama, because we've still got the placements. But sometimes, if contestants are very, very close, you might see 6 judges, 6 different winners, because each one has marked slightly differently. But we'll move on. Ding dong.
Yeah, the only thing I might add to that is with the hearing the speeches before, it mightn't be a yearly thing. When you're into judging, you can be called on fairly frequently in a given year, and you may actually see a person who delivers that club, delivers that area, and delivers that division, and you can note the change in their performance. Again, you're marking the performance on the day, just reinforcing what Brian said there earlier.
I love the bell.
Well, actually, my little dong has come detached, so I'm just using a. That's not. Don't change. Yeah. Okay, Chief Judge, core responsibilities. Yes. A Chief Judge the judges must understand how to judge the contest, and the contest officials understand their roles. Now that falls on the Chief Judge to make sure people are briefed. And the way a briefing is conducted will vary from Chief Judge to Chief Judge. It's not a hard and fast rule, but there is a general form that is followed. Usually the judging cohort will go into a room or somewhere to the side and have a bit of a discussion on how they understand the criteria to be in the contest that's about to come up. And people just compare notes so they know they're all on the right page in terms of how they interpret those criteria. And so before the contest, as you can see, there is the appointment of the voting judges, the briefing of the voting judges, and the briefing of the assistant chief judge. So there's not always an assistant chief judge, but if there is, well, that person acts or can act in the place of that chief judge in certain circumstances when the chief judge is not immediately available to the rest of the judges.
Richard, can I just hop
Yeah,
in
mate.
there? We've had a couple of questions on the chat.
Oh, on the chat, yeah.
About chief judges.
Mhm.
Now, the chief judge is actually appointed by the division governor or the area governor. They will approach someone. And often the area governor will approach the division governor, director, get with it, to be the chief judge, or else it can be one of the trio. So the thing to remember is that when appointing a chief judge, you actually do your homework and you get someone who is qualified, someone who's attended judging training, but someone who has judged a number of competitions before, because they need to have the rule book with them. They need to actually be able to put out the spot fires, make sure prevention is better than cure, but they have to be ready there in case there is a drama, that they can be assured beforehand. Okay, thanks, Jim. For area conferences or competitions, the chief judge is appointed by the area director. For division, it's possibly by trio, it'll be Mark this year, I imagine.
Yeah.
And often those guys like to go around and do the chief judging themselves too. So, and sometimes
That's right.
District director.
Yep, well, that's quite common.
Do you have any other questions about the chief judge? Because we did.
What happens when the chief judge has no idea what they're doing?
Then they wouldn't be selected.
Oh, okay.
Well, they shouldn't be.
Well, they shouldn't be collected. That's right. Selected.
No, I was just talking about a club level one when I was asked to do something, and I picked up a mistake that they didn't pick up, and it wasn't run according to how I thought it should have been run. It was a shybosh.
Yeah.
Absolute shybosh. You know, like it was unbelievable. And if I said it, he'd think I was worst in the world. But I'm the one who picked up the mistake, not the chief judge, not the person running the show. I was a ballot counter.
Yeah. So in that case, say I get Jim's point that they're still learning. It's often, the president could often invite perhaps the area director to come in and be a chief judge, which is, I know for area 14, when I was an area director for that area, I'd often go and be the chief judge for clubs because you're getting someone from outside. But it's how the VPE for the club organises it. But it is a learning experience. But you would hope they'd actually go through and read the rule book beforehand.
That's an important. The rule book really is the, well, I wouldn't say Bible as such, but you know, it might as well be. But it's set down that way.
Torah, whatever. Yeah.
Well, that's right.
I know Jim put a comment in the chat thing box about that at club level it's there for everyone to learn from and make mistakes to grow from. But this person, in my mind, should have known better. And you know, for a person like me and everyone running the show didn't pick it up. Nobody picked it up. The mistake. And it was another person competing in a competition. How could you miss that? Tell me that. Like, there was another person competing and they were the ballot counter with me. Like, you can't have said that. That's not in the rule book, is it? And, you know, like...
So, can I get you to repeat that again? Was it someone who was competing was a tally counter with you?
No, somebody competing in the was competing in the, this is at club level, was competing, was also a ballot counter. And I brought it to
That would,
people that it was not right.
yeah, that should disqualify them.
Yeah, that could actually affect the outcome and the eligibility of the person who won to keep competing through the higher levels.
Like I didn't think of that bit, Richard. But the point was that it happened, and I was just told to sit back in the corner and be a good little Vegemite, you know, and that's just not right.
No.
Yeah. No, it shouldn't have happened.
Look, I'm not saying I'm an expert. I've done a lot of judges training.
Yeah.
And I've never been a judge because I've never been given the opportunity to be one. But, you know, like why I come to this for is I want to learn.
Yeah.
You know, but it's very difficult when the people running the show don't want to listen, basically.
Okay, so we'll make sure that that becomes the learning to go on from here. So, and complete this training, Charmaine, I look forward to seeing you as a judge.
Yes. Especially if you're taking it seriously. This is good.
Yeah, and that's what we need.
Yeah.
Okay, ding dong.
Yeah. That was a nice ding dong. You did that well.
Okay, so this next role, the assistant chief judge, may or may not be in the judging panel. It's often there at area, and perhaps at division or at district. But their core responsibility is not with the judges, but with the other personnel involved, about the timers, with the ballot counting, with the sergeant at arms. And their role is to look after those people, to brief them, make sure that they know what their roles are, and supervise the counting of the ballots at the end, and also scrutinising the times to see if there are any disqualifications. There was is the process of votes from judges to chief judge, declaration of winners, going to be discussed? We can.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep. So we can. When do you want to do that now?
It might be easier after we've looked at the judging sheets and the ballots. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So and the assistant chief judge needs to ensure that there are 2 sergeants for the evaluation of the table topics contest, because you need one of them to be in the room. You need one of them to be looking after those who are located elsewhere. So voting judge, Richard.
Yeah, voting judges. Hey, love it.
These are the ones with the real responsibility.
These are the people that actually fill out the forms and add things up. You want to be able to add and to write your name. It's 2 very important things a voting judge must know is how to spell their own name and how to sign. Okay, the voting judges are responsible for, as it says, for selecting a winner, to find a winner, as opposed to evaluation, where we're not looking for a winner. Here we are looking for a winner, and it's what the voting judges do that determine who the winner will be or is. Before the contest, a voting judge must ensure that the eligibility standard is met. That's not their own. There's also the fact that each contestant must provide a signed certificate of eligibility to the chief judge. The the person who is going to be a voting judge must be sure that they have been briefed by the chief judge. It means they don't sort of rush in at the last moment once the meeting started or the show's on the road, and they can no longer be briefed because that's already happened. If they turn up late, they're not good. It's a no-no. You must be there. You must ensure that you are briefed. So it's not just the chief judge that's doing it, but you must be there to be receiving it. And every voting judge should be familiar with the contest rules for the particular contest in which they're judging. Now we have the 4 contests that have the formal rules. Some clubs run other contests as well. It might surprise you. Yes, I've judged a poetry reading contest. Okay, they're things that clubs might get up to because of their own particular interests and stuff. We're interested in the 4 contests in the rule book, and those other peripheral contests that a club may introduce would be judged using one of those forms appropriate to the type of speech.
And Richard, you raised a great point there when you talked about having to be able to spell and write your name, and that wasn't a frivolous comment, because at the bottom of the ballot, where you place your first, second and third, or place everyone if you're the tie-breaking judge, you need to write your name and sign it, because if you don't, then your voting is null and void. It's not considered.
Yes, the little piece that tears off the bottom is critical. Now, there is a script for each contest that's usually followed reasonably well by most people running contests. And part of the script does flag that for judges. Now, the problem there being that not everybody follows the script exactly. Some people will ad-lib. It's up to the judge to make sure that their judgment or their result is valid and can be used in the counting of the ballots. So, you know, while it's nice to think the contest chair or contest toastmaster, as we call them now, is probably going to flag it, make sure you know it. In my case, I make sure that the piece of paper at the bottom is ready to go, and I have at least written my name on. Technically, you should not sign it, of course, until after you have put your judgments on there. Otherwise, you've got a blank check. Okay. Is that okay with you, Brian?
Yes, that's perfect. I'm just sending a message back.
That's okay. So while Brian's doing that, oh, you're right, Brian?
No, you can keep going.
Okay. Yeah, okay. The thing is that with while it's not common, it's possible for the ballots when they're tallied up to have 2 people or more people in a given place, depending on the number of contestants, number of judges, and just how opinions differ. If that's the case, or to avoid that from happening, or to have some way of breaking through that, we usually have an appointed tie-breaking judge. That person's job will be to do all those things that a voting judge would have done. And should there be a tie with the rest, the tie-breaking judge becomes very, very powerful.
Yep.
In that person's opinion is the casting vote to break the tie.
And the interesting thing there is, just say when you've tallied up the results, Jim and Denise share first place, but you can actually have a tie for second as well. So if the tie is for first place and Shirish is the tie-breaking judge, but he didn't have either of them up high, there may have been 12 speakers in the competition, and he had Jim as number 11 and Denise as 12, it's where he's placed, not that they suddenly get relegated to 11th and 12th. It's Jim is placed above Denise, so he'll be first, she'll be second. So the order in which the tie-breaking judge places the two who've tied, or three.
Yeah. No, that's very clear. That's right. That's something I was not clear on. Very good. Again, the pre-contest stuff, it's the same as very much like the chief judge. Again, it's up to the judge to make sure the eligibility is done, that they've been briefed, and they're familiar with the contest rules. Exactly the same. And again, it's important for a tie-breaking judge to know how to spell their own name and how to sign the bottom of a form.
Yep. And Richard, I had a question here.
Yep.
That is, do the judges know who the tie-breaking judge is?
Extremely good question. It's
Generally
generally no. It would be up to the chief judge to sort that out. But as you can see, if you look at the previous slide and this one, they're pretty much the same.
Yeah, and generally, what happens is when you get your folder, you get everyone else has got the top three that they put in first, second, third. Where the tiebreaker will have, 1 to 12 or 1 to 8, whatever it is, and they'll have an envelope in there. So that is the indicator that you are the tie-breaking judge if you're not spoken about it beforehand. And the chief judge should actually call you aside. But generally, they would not, everyone else wouldn't know necessarily that the tiebreaker.
Oh, they sort of find out from there. You've opened your folder and you've seen that you're a tiebreaker judge. But that's about it. And also because often, there is John, but it's the ballot part that's different. They've got all the names, but generally you tear off your ballot and hold it up, where the tiebreaker has theirs in an envelope, and that's often a dead giveaway to everyone in the room that you're a tiebreaker, unless you bring in that everyone has an envelope. Yeah, some places do that. I've judged with envelopes for everybody, so we're not allowed to know in those cases.
Okay, yep. Okay, so specific judging criteria. Ding dong.
Yeah, ding dong, definitely. Ooh, this is yummy.
So this is for the international. Yeah, if we just stay with this one. If we look here, that we've got allocation of marks. The very first one looks at the content, and you can get a maximum of 20 marks for speech development. So I'll pick Vicky. What do you see as being speech development? What would you look for in that?
I would think the flow of the speech,
Excellent.
opening, body, conclusion.
Yep.
And how they outline their points.
Yep. And it's about the structure, opening, body, conclusion, logically flowing on from one to the other. Excellent response. So if you notice there that it's got it broken down, you have excellent, you can get 20, then you can have very good, say 14 to 19. So you can use those numerics there to try to assist you to allocate your marks. So effectiveness. Cassie, what do you see? You're going to be a speaker later. What do you see as being effectiveness in terms of the content that we have here?
Effectiveness of the content. So I mostly look at whether the message has received or served its purpose.
Brilliant. Yep. Okay, Denise, speech value. What would you look for as a judge? What do you think that means?
I'd be looking for a message.
Yeah.
And the relevance of that and the logical flow of ideas, that it's something easy to follow, or did I get lost?
Yes, okay, very good. So the thing there with Denise mentioned about a message, and that's incredibly important. Is there a purpose for this actual speech? But also about the flow. Now, we've also got in speech development flow, so we need to make sure that you're not actually penalising or marking up for the same thing in two different areas. So I'm happy to be challenged with anything I say, but and then we move down to looking at the delivery, and that's, you know, the physical, the voice, and the manner. So I guess they're fairly self-explanatory. You know, voice is the use of vocal variety, pitch, rate. The physical is how you use the stage, how you use your body language and your gestures. And if ever you've ever seen Mark Hunter give a presentation, but what he does with his wheelchair is just remarkable, because every movement has a distinct purpose for part of his speech. And sometimes when I run educations about the use of body language, it's not body language for body language's sake. The body language must have a purpose aligned to what you're saying. And of course, the manner would be your enthusiasm for the presentation, whether your conviction for your message comes across, or you're just saying it because you got bored with it. Now, one of the dangers with Pete, and this is not really for you, is part of the judging thing, but this is an observation. Some people who rehearse their speeches so much that they lose a lot of that edginess and enthusiasm because it becomes mundane. And that manner is where you mark them up or down on that. Then a language, and this is often where it's interesting, because it's the appropriateness of language and the correctness. It's about the correct use of language, correct use of grammar, and also pronunciation. But there are some words that actually can be pronounced in different ways, and it actually polarizes people. I'm thinking of skeletal or skeletal. But if we can just have a brief discussion about appropriateness. So, Dennis, what do you see as being, where would you mark appropriateness in terms of language?
Well, nothing. Certainly not the use of any offensive language. Anything that might be biased towards maybe a political bias or religious bias or sexual bias of general people. So I think that it's going to be appropriate to the, well, in the context of the area, the time, or where it might be happening. So if you're going to talk like a wharfie, it's probably fine on the wharfs, but probably not good in your average Toastmasters.
Now, you've raised a part there in terms
appropriate of the language in delivering a message without really giving offence.
Okay, next point from that is, just say you've got someone who has a very good command of vocab, and it's quite academic, but not everyone understands the words they use. So this is where it becomes quite interesting, because if the language is, you know, well delivered and it's very good vocab, but no one in the audience can understand it, is it appropriate? And that makes it really hard when, you know, because you've got to commend people for the use of language, but you also need to know your audience and to be able to impart information that way. So that's an interesting one that really does bring up some points. We had a question here before about what about slang as part of your speech? Yes, perfectly, if it's in context. I can remember going to a Lions Youth of the Year competition, and the student, who had an Italian surname, started her speech off with a quote from the One Day of the Year. Now, that's a play, this Australian play about Anzac Day, and Alf, one of the major characters, was going ballistic about people, you know, about, you know, foreigners over in our country and over here. Oh, how brilliant. She's using this and she's in character, but then she went on to the rest of the speech and was in the same vein. So I think she kind of lost it a bit there. There's nothing wrong with using the slang, particularly if it's to be in character, if it's part of your speech. But you've got to remember the rest of it. So that light and shade can be quite fascinating. Okay, ding dong.
Yeah, well,
ding dong again.
Ding dong, yeah, Del. As you can see, the judging items. Oh, okay. The judging items from the international to the humorous speech aren't greatly different. However, we've again the stuff that goes around the speech content is what's has changed. Everything below, not really, except one of the criteria or sets of criteria has actually dropped in value, and the extra value's gone into the content. You can see the speech development and effectiveness have split out. What do I say? The speech development on the international speech judging form was awarded up to 30 points for an excellent speech. Here, that 30 points is divvied out between the speech development, which is where it was sitting in the other form, and the actual audience response further down there. This is where it differs. Most of the definitions are the same all the way through, but for audience response. And that is, well, hey, I can pick on someone. This is awesome. Who didn't get it last time? Gee. Diddly dot. Yeah, okay. Yeah. What might you think of in terms of effectiveness, or how one might judge effectiveness of a humorous speech? Any thoughts? Or not the effectiveness, the audience response. How would we know that an audience received the speech well?
It's going to be harder on screen, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we've got a blank off our
oh yeah,
whatever. But usually, if people laugh or you know they're generally engaged, but that's going to be a challenge, isn't it?
It will be a challenge.
I suppose you just have to judge yourself. How did you feel it? Were you engaged? Was it effective? Because you only can judge on yourself, because that's all you're going to see.
Exactly. The thing is that in this environment now, this particular set of criteria, the speech for the audience response stuff, is really going to be much more subjective. While we're talking about objectivity, lack of bias and so on, the fact is the speech will have an effect on the judge that's listening if they're not overly concentrating on all these aspects as they're listening to it. So if I think it's amusing, hey, that's pretty good, you know. The current challenge, and part of the other workshop on online meetings would probably cover this. We have the problems now where we don't hear the giggles or the little snickers. We don't hear the sudden clap that somebody might make in an audience. But these are indications normally, and when we go back to our face-to-face world or largely face-to-face world, they will be more again the benchmark, or what we say, the metrics of gauging an audience response, knowing that other people enjoyed it as well. You can, depending on your view, I would hope judges would definitely generally have a speaker view on for a contest speech, so you're getting as much of the speaker as you can to give a valid judgment of the speech. If you were in a gallery view, you might pick up a few clues from faces and stuff on the screen, but I very much doubt you would get anything of scientific value out of it. And you really are going to be left a lot up to yourself. So as a judge, you have to make your own judgment call, I guess, as to how you're going to interpret that. The other items of physical and all that sort of stuff are exactly the same definition as for the previous speech. In fact, they remain the same throughout all the sheets. The thing that changes here, the 5 points that were added to the overall content, came out of the correctness, which is where, you know, the whole thing about matching up your language and your grammar and all that sort of stuff might become relevant. The value of that diminishes in favour of content. Happy with that, Brian?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. That's good. Okay, the table topics one's another interesting one. It's, so like we said, this is judges training. It's not training for our online sessions now, where you won't have table topics. So here we've got it split between content, delivery, and language again. So even though it's an impromptu, like a short notice speech, you still need to have speech development, an opening, a body, conclusion. So if someone has a distinct opening, they follow through with the body, and their conclusion sums it up and goes back to the introduction, perfect. What often happens with a table topic is someone will start here, then they'll get a brainwave about another topic, and they will go off on that tangent and try to bring it back. So they would not perform as well on speech development unless they can tie in the first part of that intended outline. So effectiveness there, it's effectiveness of the content. Is there an actual message? Have they spoken to the topic? Now, if I just digress here slightly, I can remember a Northern Division table topics competition once, where the contest chairperson or contest toastmaster read the topic out, and one of the topic was fact is stranger than fiction. Now, the speaker misheard. In fact, most people in the audience were mishearing, but because of it's a well-known phrase, you know what it should be. But what he heard was fact is stranger than fiction. So it went off on this tangent about people's weight and their belief that they're fat. So it was, yeah, quite fascinating, particularly watching the audience and that person's members of that area squirming. Oh, what's he doing? So, has anyone ever come across a topic like that where it's been perhaps misheard?
That's
Denise?
why sometimes, Brian, the contest chair will actually have the question written down.
Yeah.
And they'll read it, but show them it as well.
Yeah.
Which is, I suppose, a good strategy. And there's nothing against that.
Yeah. And reading it twice too, of course, is what they're supposed to do, you know, with the topic again and then have it for them to read. So that's, you're trying to get around any problems to give everyone a fair go. And so once again, the physical, the voice, the appropriateness, and those connections are quite the same. You know, the connections with the language, with the appropriateness, the way, the correctness. Okay. Ding dong.
Not quite. Just looking at the chat, the thing about a person who is not all that physically able to say perform gestures and so on. I have the honour of knowing a guy named Dinesh who lives down the Gold Coast and is Australia's, or probably the world's, first paraplegic doctor. He was actually a lawyer who had an accident and is now in a wheelchair, and hey, he works in hospitals. He's a real doctor. Now, I was able to get Dinesh to make a presentation at a conference at the Gold Coast a few years back for another organisation. And I tell you what, he didn't have to use gestures. You know, his face said it all, his voice said it all, and people were absolutely locked to their chairs, and their vision was just locked on him. A person in that circumstance, we as people do respond to that generally in a positive manner. We do look at those people and we're more attentive, and they have no trouble and don't need somebody to make gestures for them. I like the comment or the question about props, because props, if they need assistance with props, you know, to actually work with them, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I don't have a problem with that myself. But gestures, no. Dinesh can hold his own against anybody. Now I'll ding. Evaluation. Whoa, yeah. Okay. Don't you love evaluations?
I do.
I love evaluations. Gee, that's great. The big thing and the big difference here is, where do the points go? Analytical quality. What do we think analytical? Anybody? I won't pick on someone. Does somebody have an opinion they'd like to voice on what they think analytical quality might be in terms of judging an evaluation?
I haven't spoken yet.
Oh, Jim, yeah, please.
Okay, to me, analytical quality is really based on 3 to 4 things. Firstly, have they actually thought of a point? As in, it shouldn't just be a retelling of the speech. Have they thought of a specific speechcraft point? Secondly, have they given an example from the speech? So they'd say, no, they've actually been listening to the speech. Thirdly, have they given a reason why this point is important? It's like, this is a good point. We said here in the speech, and it's good because, or the why. And maybe another point at the end to say how it can be added into the future speeches, or how it can relate to the audience as well. It's quite complicated, but if you break it down, it's not that bad. Back to you.
Thank you, Jim. Sorry, go for it.
You're analysing not only the speech and what was said, but also their presentation as well. And the pitch and the rate and
all of that stuff comes into it. And as Jim said, it's not a retelling of the speech, which often does happen as people are trying to gain their experience in making evaluations. The other recommendations is fairly obvious as to what that would mean, but note again, the scores are particularly high. In the case of an evaluation contest, the analytical quality and the recommendations have taken up 70 out of 100 points. 70% is wrapped up in those two sets of criteria. That's what we want in our evaluators. The analytical quality, and you can get a good analytical quality while you're being a critic, but what makes a critique different, or what makes an evaluation different from a critique, is giving a good, solid recommendation. You know, as Jim said, a why, a what, perhaps even a how, as a teaching thing. So the recommendation delivers that direction for somebody to, hey, this is a great idea. I should take that on board. Yeah, I can see the value in that. Yeah. And so has there been a decent recommendation, not just a what a critic can do? I can give you the strong points, I can give you the weak points, done. That's not quite an evaluation. The recommendation is what makes the difference.
Yep.
You got thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, and the thing to be very much aware of is that if you're judging an evaluation competition, you're not putting in, oh, they made good recommendations. That's not part of the analytical quality, because it's a separate category. So you're analysing what they've said, how they've said it, and impacts, and then you're giving recommendations for what they should, how they can enhance it.
Yeah, and again, I draw your attention to the heavy weight there in terms of scoring. If you had a really good performer, how much they would gain in their scoring.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Points there are really important. That is technique, and it's about how you come across, whether you are supportive, encouraging, enthusiastic for it.
Yep.
But the next part, it's worth another 15 points, but it's where a lot of people fall down in an evaluation contest. They do not sum up. They can see how much, how many points go for the analytical quality and the recommendations, and they focus on that. Then they're running out of time, so they've got to stop. But another 15 points comes from recapping. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that could be critical in this whole world where we're judging or setting up a contest and finding a winner. 15 points is a heap, because quite often you'll find in these contests you get a bundle of good speakers. Like you can walk into some areas or a division and you'll get stunned at the quality of the speakers, and you'd be surprised how 1 or 2 points can make all the difference. 15 points thrown away without making a summary, gee. But as a judge, you've got to be aware of that.
Yeah. And Denise has made a very valid point in the chat, and that is your summation is a recap with no extra information.
Yep. This is a conclusion. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like debating. If you're the first speaker, you introduce all the new material. 2, you rebut and you elaborate. And if you're the third negative, you can only rebut and sum up. You can't introduce any new arguments because no one can answer back to you. So it's a good way to remember it.
I like debates.
Hey guys, today's my wedding anniversary. And,
oh, really?
Yeah. And
awesome.
At our at the reception 32 years ago, my best man had given me his vast experience of as a married man. He was married 2 weeks before me. He said, always have the last say, even if it is yes, dear. So your summation is the last say, and it's just like, yep, here's what I've said.
Okay. Ding.
Yep. Ding dong. Okay. So we're looking at some common misconceptions with specific judging topics. Now, we had a bit of discussion about this before, about humour, originality, props, and protest. So if you're delivering an international competition and you've got humour in it, do you get marked down? Do you get marked up? Because, you know, I've heard people, like from the audience, these are not judges. Oh, that person had too much humour in there. They should go in the humorous competition. No, an international speech can make people laugh. They can make people cry. And if they're a special type of international speech and they're an oratory, it is they can move people to laughter or tears or to action. So, Richard, do you want to say anything about humour?
Humour? I laugh. It is to laugh. I wouldn't know a joke or humour from anything else. But everybody else always seems to think I've had humour in my speeches. I've got no idea why. You know, gee.
Yes, and a great point from Denise. I love these chat comments. They're good, aren't they? I'm getting old and grey and losing hair, so I forget things. So humour itself isn't the issue. It's the message. Now, if you convey the message to people with the use of humour or tears, well and good. But it's about imparting that message to other people. So all 4 contests may contain humour. No contest should be marked down because humour was used, because, you know, you don't think, oh, it was too funny, so it was frivolous. No, humour was used there for effect. So judges actually mark accordingly on how appropriately that humour was used. If it's completely inappropriate, like it's poking fun at people, then it's not a particularly good thing to have. It's inappropriate. Now, humour can lighten a mood, and as a little example, I was asked to chair a forum on palliative care for the practice. And I knew I was supposed to lighten the mood and get people being loosened up. So I thought, how can I actually introduce humour into this? So I told a bit of a story, which was true. I had been diagnosed as a diabetic. And so when you first get that diagnosis, you're going off for all these appointments, you know, to diabetic nurses, dietitians. And so my staff knew that I was zipping out all the time for these medical appointments, but they didn't know why. And the lady who was organising this palliative care workshop or forum rang the school to speak to me, and I was unavailable. So she said, I was just telling it's Roz about palliative care. So she knew that I would know what I was talking about. The office staff didn't. And so that went around school like wildfire about, that's why he's going off for these competitions, for these appointments. He's obviously got to go to palliative care, so we know what that means. So that was my little attempt at humour to lighten the load. It kind of did work, but it's all about communication and the message, isn't it?
Yep.
So, ding dong.
Yeah, ding dong. Okay, the originality of the speech. Okay. Not always easy to pick up, but a speech can contain up to 25% of other sourced content. But if it is used as such, quotes from fourscore and 7 years ago and all that sort of stuff. Any source needs to be acknowledged within the content of the speech and the delivery of the speech. We have the 5 to 7 minute speeches, which, as it says, they're substantially original. 25% can be quoting, paraphrasing, referencing something else, but that quoted material must be quoted as such during the speech.
And as an example, can I just hop in here?
Please.
There's a poem by Icarus Allsorts about, and it goes something like this: a little bit of heaven fell out of the sky one day. It landed in Vermont, northeastern USA. The general at the radar screen rubbed his hands with glee and pressed the button that started World War III. Now, you could use the quote from that poem as a way of launching into a speech about the dangers of nuclear war. So if I was delivering that and I used the entire poem, I'd be in danger of breaching originality. But using parts of it to illustrate a point or to captivate the audience at the start may be okay.
And this is a point on which protests can arise, and we'll get to that as well. But it's interesting, the speakers are not allowed to make reference to other speeches presented at the same contest. Each speech stands on its own.
Yeah. One of the interesting things there is, you want to say, why would you as a contestant want to draw the audience's attention to another speaker? But they may, because they may listen to it and they want to put it down in some way. For example, Richard may have given a speech about the dangers with mobile phones and why they should be banned from school. And he might say, mobile phones make me mad. So I might get up and try to be funny. And if I say as part of my speech, oh, we heard today that mobile phones make Richard mad. Well, I can tell you he's always mad. Now, I would be disqualified because I've referenced him, another contestant in my speech, and he's in the same competition. Okay? So it can happen.
And it's also very easy to happen as something is just because you agree with what a point made by somebody else that you think somehow adds extra value to your speech. The temptation can always be there a little too readily, and it's no.
Ding dong. Okay, props and the use of electronic equipment. Now, props is actually can be a common misconception with humorous speeches, because I can remember getting through a number of humorous speeches at district level, and a lot of the contestants have costumes and dress-ups, but there was one year that the person who won was the only one who didn't have a costume and all these other props, but relied on the humour with their language and the stories. So props and all of the other aspects can add to it, and it's allowed in the competition, as long as it doesn't overshadow and encroach upon what you're saying. But just because you use it doesn't mean to say that you guarantee the first place, because it goes back to the speech against the criteria. No electronic equipment is used in the table topics or evaluations, so it's only the international and the humorous. So, ding dong.
Ding dong, yes. protests and disqualifications. Oh, yes.
Can I just stop you for a minute, Richard? There's a question. Was a question from Charmaine, and that was,
right, yeah.
if music is going to be part of it, and I'm just imagining you're delivering a speech about Australia, and you want to show pride in your nation, and you might want to have in the background Advance Australia Fair playing, or We Are One, softly. Who plays it? Well, that can be the role of the Sergeant at Arms, for example. They can, because the speaker to play it is actually can be distracting or interrupting the flow of their speech, which is what they don't want to do. Sorry, go on.
No, and that's also a thing that, you know, these things are quite acceptable in the international and humorous speech for that reason. You do have the props for that. Okay, as far as protests and disqualifications or protests, let's go protests first. The only people who can lodge a protest in the speech are judges and contestants. How's that, eh?
So in that example we had before, Charmaine being a tally counter, she was not eligible to launch a protest against.
Yeah. Although I think Charmaine's point was that we're looking at process.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's true. A person otherwise involved in the proceedings, or the doings, or an audience member can't say, oh, by the way, that was at least 50% blah blah blah. Not kosher.
Can I just clarify something there?
Please.
When they're talking about protests, that only relates to eligibility and content.
Originality, yeah.
The originality, yeah.
Yes.
Yep, that's
okay,
it.
so the process that Charmaine was talking about, she should bring attention to the Chief Judge.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a protest as such. It's an observation on process, which is a different thing again. Here we're talking about the actual protest against a contestant, or what a contestant has delivered that speech. And as it says, they should be told to contest chair or chief judge before the announcement of the contest winners. There's no point going and protesting against a speech on those criteria after the event.
Yep.
You know, it's got to be done. It's got to be done before anything else goes on, and it's got to be handled through by the chief judge, using making sure that wonderful contest rule book that's out there, that everyone should be familiar with by now. Have people been reading it while we've been showing slides? Yeah, I wonder,
You're trying to get us out, mate.
And the thing is, if you want to be a decent judge from year to year to year, the book changes. Be aware of that. Make sure you refresh yourself as an ongoing judge. It's a great thing to be doing. I've really enjoyed it. I've done it for years. I've really enjoyed it. And that's a comment on the side. Nothing to do with content. I should be going ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Please, Jim.
I will be right now. If I go here, wait. In the chat box for everybody is an international speech contest. That international speech contest form, so people can download it and play along at home. Back to you.
I think Brian's printing his off.
So thank you, Richard and Brian. That was really very intense, very in-depth, and fed the questions really well. And I know there'll be a lot more, but we've got to keep it moving.
Yep.
So hopefully with that in mind, we will now present Sassy, who will be delivering a speech for you to judge. So get the international speech.
Do you mind if I introduce it? Because I've got the evaluation form.
Yes. So that's where we're up to now. Sassy, I just want to say that she was 1 page short sending her DTM recognition. So she really is a DTM, but she hasn't officially got it. So she's for this an ALS ACG, but she'll be a DTM very, very, very soon.
Good.
So Jim, would you be able to introduce Sassy, please?
Oh, perfect.
Can I share my screen as well? Is that allowed?
Yes, you can.
Just okay. I will stop sharing and.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. I would here. Am I ready? Yes. I would like to introduce Sassy. As Denise has said, we have basically a DTM on our hands, someone who is an excellent speaker, and she is doing a speech on Pathways called Connect with Your Audience. And this will be an international speech. It will be 5 to 7 minutes as per the international speech guidelines. So with that, I would like to hand you over to Sassy, and her speech title is called Respect Me. Sassy with Respect Me. And I will be timing you with the timing lights.
Respected Toastmasters, respect me. These 2 words we silently convey everyone we communicate. Respect, it's like air. If it is present, nobody thinks about it. But if you take it away, it's all people can think about. My main message is respect is a cornerstone for any healthy relationship. Also, to think what exactly is respect. What is respect? It's also called esteem, is a positive feeling or action shown towards someone, something considered important or held high esteem or regard. It conveys a sense of admiration for valuable qualities, irrespective how you look like. Everyone disagrees sometimes, and that is totally okay. Be mindful of how you communicate and appreciate your difference, your look, your feel. You can disagree with someone, but still respect their opinion. Respect means you accept somebody for who they are and where they are different from you, and it doesn't matter you don't agree with them. I love Toastmasters because there is the place I saw people respect each other and respectfully disagree and contributed harmoniously. I, Shashi, born in India, brought up in Middle East, and spent most of my time in Middle East. After marriage as well, I never worried about others respecting me when I was in Middle East. I never had an incident at workplace that I can remember related to disrespect. When I was in Dubai, after delivering a baby girl, I decided to migrate a country where women have more respect and freedom. The reason I migrated to Australia is only because of that. Somehow, I thought developed countries respect women than in developing countries. My fellow Toastmasters, I was not totally right. Here in Brisbane is the place I was hurt with tears, and I realized what disrespect is. With all the respect, let me reveal the perpetrator also migrated to Australia from another English-speaking country. People may call this behavior as racism or sexism, I cannot differentiate why one colleague, a senior manager, same as my level, disrespect me. I ask this question, are they struggling to accept a lady or a colored lady in IT leadership? Ultimately, disrespect hurt all. I recently experienced from the same colleague exclusionary and overruling behavior, condescending comment, undermine my position or value, misogynistic comments, sarcasm, laughing and ridiculing, people who laugh at you or ridicule at you and doing their best to undermine your sense of self-worth and well-being. What do you do at that time? I realize the power game. The rude behavior can be the way to display power. The reason he may be doing is to undermine my self-esteem and take control of me to drive that situation to his own way. When it happens, obviously we feel sad and doubt our leadership. So I searched how my brain works and how can I best get off out my brain and others. The knowledge I acquired about how to influence others didn't work in above situation, but will work only people who value you, respect you. I thought, what can I control? Reaction, my thoughts, my emotion, my decision, my choice. The item I do not have control is others' behavior, others' interpretation, others' intention. Influence is the key for any successful relationship. We know that, but I cannot change anything here. Can it make it work for me? Ladies and gentlemen, our brain normally work or look for threats before it rewards. It asks two survival questions. Will it hurt me? Can I take it to survive? I learned there is only one way to optimize this relationship. Understanding others, understand ourselves, and give mutual respect. That is something both parties to practice. It doesn't matter how much effort I put it. I asked my Google mentor, what strategies Google recommend for me this threat situation? I haven't received a satisfied answer. Google said critical is to walk away with well-being and dignity in hand. Dear Toastmasters, I'm still researching to manage this complex behavior, but I will leave one question to you. What strategies you take when someone constantly disrespects you? Remember, these experiences are people who look different and diverse, and people entirely not look like you. The reason I'm sharing with you is there is some men who watched some of this situation. It surprised me why the men bystanders giving a blind eye or find it entertaining. Today, my message is for the bystanders. If you witness discrimination, say something. You can help to show this behavior is not okay. Any man could remind a misogynist about their attitude, then there will not be any sexism. Let men be the advocates to protect women in workplace. Let fit people be the advocates to protect disabled. Let young be the advocates to protect aged. Let white be the advocates of black. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Sassy. Very important message. Thank you. Jim, are you evaluating or judging?
All right. I believe now we can give everybody a minute or two to evaluate the speech with the form, which I will put back in the chat for people who didn't get it. if I can.
Jim's choosing of a minute is relevant because a contest Toastmaster will actually, at the end of his speech, ask everyone to remain silent for that minute to give the judges a chance to get up their scoring.
It's back in the chat. So a minute from now, and then we can go into a bit of a debrief and question and answer session at the end.
Some of you may be starting with a blank piece of paper. Others may have had a bit of a jotting paper, yes, like Richard has, and jotted down some points. Others may have ticked and flicked and put plus or minus beside the criteria. Nothing is right, it is just different, and we may get a little bit of feedback, Jim, on how people are deciding what to do. It's a very big call to do something in a minute from nothing.
So that is our minute. So feel free to judge, and we will start a bit of a debrief.
Have people printed their name on their form and signed it so we can count your ballot? Do we have a result?
Yes.
Oh, timer. Was there a disqualification? No, we don't find any of that out until after the chief judges come back with the tally counter and the timekeeper's returns. All those forms are done by other people in the meeting.
Yes. Now, one of the questions way back in chat was the length of time after the contest where the contest master will interview the speakers and try to fill in time, and then there's nothing more to ask. They've given them their participation certificates, and they're still waiting, and they're still waiting. What does one do when it's an exorbitant length of time? It sort of would appear that there could be a problem. Brian, you're mute.
So if it's a lengthy period of time, it could be the rechecking. It might be because there has been a protest. But what the contest chair could do is, instead of having to do a song and dance routine, they could actually bring up each of the contestants again and give them some more Q&As about what they've got on their sheets. Because you don't want people going away, like you don't want to call a break, because then you've got to get everyone back together again for the announcement. If there's raffles, you could always do a raffle, or Dennis has suggested a round robin, which is also a very good point.
We do have one question from Suresh. He might not be here, but we'll ask it just in case he watches the video later. His question is the process of votes from judges to chief judges to the declaration of winners going to be discussed? How do we get the forms across to the chief judge? Say we've done the ballot, what's the process between that to the chief judge to getting it done?
Right. Well, the judges individually sign. Make sure their ballot is valid, your name and signature, and they've scored the 3 places, or up to 3 places. They tear that section off the bottom of the form. I mean, what you see on the slide is only the top part of the form. The rest of the page is a tear-off piece, which, well, in my case, I like to pre-fold along the line a few times and then tear it off nice and neatly, rather than doing a great big rip up the middle of the sheet. That is then folded and held up above my head, and a tally counter who is appointed elsewhere in the meeting will come and take that out of my hand, and that will then be delivered to the chief judge by that person. The chief judge will accompany the tally counters out of the room to do the tallying, and there's a special form the tally counter has on which that is done, and they exchange their roles, so it's done twice. Once with one person reading out the judging slip and the results, and then the other way. Then they work out that, present it to the chief judge as a result. If there is a tie, the chief judge then opens the tie-breaking envelope and has to go through that and make a call, as Brian said.
And the assistant chief judge would have collected the timers sheets, which will then be considered, and if there's a disqualification, they will take that person out. Just put a line from not execute.
And that's all done outside. This
will be one of the points of discussion in our next workshop. How do we do this virtually? And there's a number of ways we can do it, but we're not talking about that tonight.
Because I'm afraid. It's scary. But how did people find that exercise?
It's very
is it confronting?
Very in depth, because it's a bit like when you're watching a game of sport. When you're umpiring, you're not sitting back like literally just enjoying it. You're listening and you're critically evaluating. So it's not like you're just sitting back as a participant. You really have to do active listening. But Sassy, I thought you did remarkably well. And can you tell us how you felt giving a speech online tonight?
It was really good.
As in preference to face-to-face?
Yeah, I find it difficult to track the time because, first of all, I didn't get time to look at the time by recording it myself. So I was looking at this monitor and talking to the camera, and my timer and like my Zoom all of yours is in other monitors. So basically I have to look like this to look at the timer. So when I was talking, I forgot to look at the timer. So I did finish all my speech. I didn't cut anything. So I'm sure I may have gone over.
So our first training session was on virtual presentations and tips, and that'll be put on our district website as well as on YouTube, of tips of how to do virtual presentations. So in context now, when that demonstration training was given, we didn't know what we now know. So that might be a very good one to actually watch. So Jim, can you start the debrief, please?
Okay, if we bring up, where am I? Yeah. No, not that one. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Sassy, you actually won.
Yeah, thank you.
Who appointed you chief judge?
Yes.
If we can here, just screen that one. Here, as you can see, we have the entire judge's ballot here. So, as normally when a chief judge goes back to the judges normally after the contest. They will have a little bit of a debrief. The chief judge will never ask you what you have scored, because that is your personal preference. All they will see is the first, second, and third, and then they'll be able to know if there's a bit of a discrepancy between first, second, and third. And then they might go back and ask to the judges and say, judges, there was quite a bit of a discrepancy between first, second, and third. So can I ask, how did you feel about the contest? Or do you have any points about the speaker? What do you think the speaker did well? What do you think the speaker didn't do well? To try and understand why the judging was how it was. Because in a lot of cases, if the speakers are equally brilliant or equally not so brilliant, you could get scores all over the place because they're just as good. There might not be a clear standout. The other thing to remember is, hypothetically, and it has happened before, the person who wins the contest might not get first place from any of the judges because it's based on points. As you can see down the bottom here, that your winner gets 3 points, the second place gets 2 points, and the third place gets 1 point. It tallies up, and the winner might get all the second places and get more points than the person who gets 1 or 2 first places, so therefore they win. So really, it's not about one person giving the best, it's about the aggregate of who is the best overall based on all the judges' scores as an aggregate. And that's how we determine the winner.
Tim?
Yes.
We want to get inside your brain. Sassy's just finished her speech and you're starting to fill this out. How do you start?
What I do is, because I don't want to do too much writing while the speech is going, because I'm supposed to be focusing really on the speech. So what I do, everyone is different here, but my little technique is, do you see on the side of the judging form, there's a space, like a white space on one side and a white space on the other side? I put a plus or a minus or a tick or a cross or something in that line on each little category. So say, for instance, I realized Sassy had really great speech development and I thought her structure was absolutely brilliant. I'd give her a little plus there just to say, I think it's really good. And if it was brilliant, I'll give 2 pluses. And I'll go down for each of the categories, put a plus or a minus on the ones I thought stood out to me. And the reason why I do that is then after the speech is completed, I have a rough idea of what was good and what wasn't good, so I can trigger my memory back to her speech. And then I can go and mark them off. And then I mark the numbers based on how I felt they were done.
What about you, Brian?
Would you do that in pencil, given the fact that all contestants will be on that form? If you start putting pluses and minuses, you may get them confused.
I can do pencils, or I just cross them out when they're done. Yeah. Because I can do that on the top sheet and the judge's ballot stays at the bottom. Or if there's quite a lot of contestants, I might do it on a spare sheet of paper under each person's name. The reason is just to have a quick mark to know which of these they did well without thinking too much about it and missing the next part of their speech.
Brian, what's your method?
I actually have another sheet of paper and I take copious notes while the speaker is speaking. I endeavour, though, to do it without looking down, but still focusing on the speaker. So I'll just make some quick notes on my sheet of paper. It actually looks a bit like a dog's breakfast afterwards, but at least I've got a bit of my thoughts as she was going through. You know, I may have written something like confusion between mixed metaphors, or it could be confusing message, or spot on, great development.
What about you, Richard? What's your modus operandus?
I tend not to take a lot of notes, but I do pick highlights and, if necessary, lowlights. And then the rest, I'm trying to concentrate on the speaker and the delivery. And I like face-to-face because I like the interaction with the people around, and I do observe what's happening around me. In an online world, of course, we're finding that a little bit hard. So in an online world, I'm probably more likely to be taking a lot of notes and then working from that. But I wouldn't want too much because I've only got 1 minute to make sense of it all.
So would anyone else like to put their hand up and suggest how they fill out the form?
Dennis.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of judging, but I generally go to the furthest out, like the last column on the sheet for the first contestant, and the names are already on the sheet. I put them in as they're read out. So as the speech starts off, I really have a good look at the framing of the speech, the setting up of the start, and then how the structure develops from it. And that doesn't take an awful lot in a speech to identify it. And then I work the scoring as the speech progresses on down. And I've got a fair idea. I put in very lightly put in the number that I have in my mind until the speech is down to its completion. And then I might make adjustments of 1 or 2. And that takes up the last bit takes up the minute. And I'm generally ready to go to the next one. The main thing that I do is I fold over the paper so that I can't see what I've scored the contestant to just been. So the contestant comes on and starting with a whole new column. I don't allow myself to be influenced by, I give it a 10 there, I'll have to give this one a 9 or a 7 or whatever.
Okay.
I don't allow those numbers, so that's hidden.
Yeah.
So
When do you add
I'm
them all
looking
up?
for a clean list.
Do you add it up as
I
you
find
go?
it works best for me.
Jill, would you like to give us your thoughts? You look that you're right across this task.
Can you hear me properly? I'm not sure how good this is. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. I've never judged before. So this is the first time I've had a go. And of course I get caught up with getting the numbers right. And I suppose it's a little bit like marking papers. You've got to sort of decide what number you're going to choose as a baseline. And just to mark one person by themselves is difficult. It'd be probably easier to say have 2 or 3, and then I can go, well, this person was stronger in this area than that person, so this person's going to get more points. But just doing it all one person, no experience before, I found that really challenging. And especially the physical one, the appearance, body language, speaking area. I mean, how can I mark Sassy well for that when she can't get up and use the area, and yet I can't penalise her for that because she's online?
You may have noticed her hands moving up and down. They weren't fully in the screen. A point of advice perhaps might be to lower the camera a bit so your face is actually higher, gives your hands more scope to be seen. Okay, it might look, they're big hands, look at that, big hands. But rather just see the flick of a finger, it'd be nice to see your hand movement. Things like that. It's a different world on camera. This is the whole problem, and then this is where the online meeting workshop will sort of look at things like that. For a judge, it's going to be very hard to pick up those things. Hopefully, people will learn to give us more through their faces. You know.
So, Con, you're a speaker. and now you're a judge, do you think being a good judge helps you be a better speaker?
Sometimes, yes. I think the answer to that question is yes, simply because I can become a better speaker because I've been a judge on 3 occasions. I have a slightly better idea what I'm being judged on when I'm conducting my speech. So that does help a little bit. But on the 3 occasions I've judged, I've taken Brian's approach and make copious notes, which I found worked well, and the speeches, the judging contest on 3 occasions that I was participating in went through quite smoothly. But I really do like Jim's approach with the plus and minuses. That's been very helpful for me for future judging I do. And also a very valid point, what Dennis said, that often I have, as I'm an inexperienced judge, I would sometimes be guilty of what Dennis said and compare one speaker to the other and say, if I gave that speaker 10, I should give this speaker 9. So if I hide all the scores, I think I can become a better judge. So that's a very, very good point that Dennis made. Thanks.
Well said.
I do have one question for the panel. Can the chief judge also be the tie-break judge? Yes or no?
No, it's no.
Okay.
You have to make, you haven't got enough judges, you've got to make one of your general judges at the tiebreaker judge.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So you can understand the more judges you've got, the more the spread's over, and generally overall you get a much better result, because 2 people could have totally different views, 3 people could have 2 views, but if you've got 5, you're generally pretty right, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of trying to help a few clubs find extra judges. Who would I turn to you, Denise, for help?
Yes.
Find extra judges? Yes, okay.
Yeah, and perhaps Jim as well, we want to actually get would you call it a depository? No, that's not right. What word am I trying to find?
I think
don't use suppository.
A list.
You're looking for
I've got to find a list. So
a list is good.
You want to
a
pool
list
of judges.
of judges, because remember, it's all online now. So I could ask John to be a judge at Redcliffe, or Brian could ask me to judge something at Mackay, and Dennis could ask me as well. So that's really going to be very good, because I've never heard any of your speakers. And remember, we spoke about objectivity and the bias and the prejudice. If you know that Ali Hannon's a great speaker, even before she's got up, it's pretty hard not to be biased that she's a world champion, for example. And if you haven't heard anyone before, and very often you think, you know, you were far better at doing that at club than you were area, for example. You can't say what it was before, it's what it is now. So Conya, I'll definitely help you.
So one more thing, what eligibility criteria is required to be a chief judge? So I've been a voting judge on 3 occasions. Am I eligible to be a chief judge at the next contest?
Yes, I think so. I would allow that, John. Con.
Well, are you an honest man?
No.
Con's an aspiring area director. So coming back to Charmaine's thought about the wrong people being the wrong, wrong judges, it's very, very upsetting when people are out of their depth. So we won't let that happen. So we need to get a lot of depth. Yes, Brian?
One thing, if someone is aspiring to be a chief judge, but they're a little bit nervous at this stage, appoint them as an assistant chief judge to get used to that process, where they're not actually judging, but they're actually doing the organisation. Yeah.
Get a mentor.
John, would you have anything that you'd like to add about tonight? Any comments, any questions, or?
Yeah, look, just a few tricks for. I also use the technique that that Dennis nominated of starting on the right-hand side of the page. And that way you're not distracted by the previous one. And I'm not sure who it was that put some marks up the top. I think it might have been Jim. Some marks up the top and marks down the bottom. I do that in relation to the 3 terms that are on each roll. So tonight, Sarsi got a big yes for structure, borderline for organisation, and a big yes for support material. For ideas, yes. Logic, yes. Original thought, yes. In that it's something that needs to be said. I mean, she's not the first person that ever said it. In fact, I've heard the same story. Oh, I think half the population have said it at some point or other. But so for that reason, so for each of those ones, put some up the top, some down the bottom, and then sort it out on where you're going to give them a roll. And remember, you've got 30 points to give away on, well, not in the international one, but you've got 20 points to give away for speech development. Use it. There's probably nobody there that's going to be a 2, but I'd start counting down at about 10 for a disappointing speech development. You don't start at 24. Okay? So they're just some thoughts for judges. They're just my techniques.
John, scenario is that 3 speakers come out on 75. When you've added it all up,
yep.
What do you do?
Go back and look at where the highs and the lows are on the individuals. So I don't do any adding up. I don't know the totals until after all the speakers have spoken.
Oh, okay.
So I give points at the end of the speech, but don't add them up. And that's deliberate.
For that reason.
So that I don't start comparing, well, is he between the 73 and the 75 or above the 75? You know, that's just one of my techniques for treating each speaker individually.
That's excellent. I think we're probably getting a little bit better because with pathways evaluations, we're ticking and flicking 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And
yeah, but nobody's reading the 5, 4, 3, 2. Nobody's reading the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Or I'm not saying nobody, but people aren't reading the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on the pathway. A 1 on a pathway means that you're starting to develop.
Exactly, but it may be they need to do letters, not numbers.
Well, possibly, yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, yeah.
So
look,
maybe,
I understand that.
Maybe we should have a continuum. This is where you are because, yeah, you don't want to be too demoralising, and that's why they say sometimes for the first speakers, don't fill out that numbers.
Well, that makes sense. Or else explain what you're doing when you do
the oral evaluation.
Oh, the numbers shouldn't appear in the oral evaluation.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, Richard.
I like to tell people there are 3 evaluations. There's the oral evaluation, which is about what everyone in the club can learn from this speech.
Yes.
Okay. And you encourage the speaker. The written evaluation is pretty detailed and says this is where you work on next. So, you know, if you've got...
Apply it to the next one, yes.
If you've got a bunch of 2s and a 3 and a 4, don't try to turn the 4 into a 5. Try and turn the 2 into a 3. One of the 2s, and that's your focus for next time. But the most important evaluation is the quick chat you have when you're handing back the sheet. And that's the encouraging and supportive chat.
That's right. And that's some really good points, John. Thank you so much. I have had feedback from speakers that didn't place they put so much work into their speech and they walk out the door with a participation certificate, it just goes to show you how well we have conditioned our speakers to receive evaluation, so they walk out the door feeling that they've done well and they can't wait to speak the next time. Whereas with judging, you don't get that same feeling, and that's why some people will do speech contest once but never come back, because they just feel, oh, nothing, you know. And the other thing is, how do we not get, well, we won't be doing it now because cameras will be off and hearing will be off, people that bring along 30 people as the mob crowd and laugh all the time. You can really sense when it's actually a little bit of a dodgy setup, can't you?
Yep.
I think we need to be very objective about that.
It's going to be interesting to see what sort of rules they come up with.
Yeah, so Sassy doesn't walk away feeling deflated. Would you be able to give her a 2-minute evaluation before we close tonight?
Yes, I can, and then I will sum up. Sassy, I think you had a really great speech today on a really topical point that everybody in the audience could really understand. And as an international speech, I think it's something that has really broad international appeal. We need to remember with international speeches, it's an international speech. The idea is so we can export broader appeal speeches. So we talk topics that say you do get to division, or you do go to district, or you even go internationally, you can still use the same speech because it's got that broad appeal, something you did very well. And I also liked how you had that bit of a chronological story where you went from point to point with a bit of a break in between. It really helped your speech well and separated the points out so we could understand each point that you were saying. The one little room for improvement I would like you to work on in the future will be, as said by many of our other speakers already, is watching the screen space. Because going by the rule book, you are technically supposed to be a meter back from a camera and have a meter on either side as your screen space. So if you could consider that, and maybe another idea could be to go on to Zoom, use a free account, and just look at yourself and give a few hand gestures in the Zoom screen so you can see how far across this way you've got, how far across that way you've got, so you can practice the hand gestures while you're on Zoom. And then you'll be even better at them, because the hand gestures were brilliant. We just couldn't see them. But also, finally, I think you also really understood your audience, and you really gave us a topic that I think all relates to us. And at the end, you had a great call to action where we can all do something at the end. So, Sassy, I felt overall you had great speech structure. You really understood what an international speech is. Just think about your screen space, and you really knew your audience. Well done, Sassy, and congratulations on your speech.
Thank you.
So that was perfectly demonstrated, the difference between evaluating and judging. Thank you so much for your attention here. Con's last question.
Just quickly, Jim, I'm sitting 1 meter away from my camera at the moment. I thought that my body looks too small to be like I'm 1 meter away from the camera. I just thought for a competition, I'm too small. I should be a bit closer.
Yeah, that's good. Come closer.
Can I make a point? It's not that you've got to be a meter back. That's the maximum you can be back, I believe.
Maximum 1 meter. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just on that point, Con, when you made gestures, they were totally clear to everybody in the room. And this is the difference half a metre makes.
Mm.
I'm probably a metre back now, as opposed to here, which I'm still 700 mil away from the camera because I've got my monitor and my camera pushed way back for double screens and things. But yeah, it makes a heck of a difference. Jim's advice to Sassy.
I'm just looking where I am here 1 metre. From an evaluator or from a judge's point of view, I feel that my face is too small in the picture and you can't see eye contact or any facial expressions.
Nothing's stopping you going backwards and forwards, Con.
Ah, okay.
You know, or to the side. So, and you could also be standing. So these are the little tips to go back and look at our virtual presentations.
Can I just very
quickly? It's 8:45, Jim. We need to wrap up.
Right now, very quickly.
Yes.
Just if I can just share 2 screens very quickly. Here's our last screen, which has all the judging resources on them. So it's there in the slide, so you can go to all the resources. And the last slide is just a thank you for attending. And finally, the other one I would like to very quickly advertise, if I can, very quickly, is our How to Master Your Online Speech Contest, which Denise was talking about. The Zoom link will be coming very shortly, and it's on the 4th of October, 2 to 4 p.m. Back to Denise.
I'd like to thank Brian, I'd like to thank Richard, and I'd like to thank Sassy. Can we show them our appreciation?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Madam
Please
Klysz,
send
may I say a
Jim and
word?
I feedback. And we are doing this again on Sunday, and we're expecting double the number on Sunday when people are freer. I really appreciate Brian and Richard's passion, their depth of knowledge, and their willingness just to share it, which is a true reflection of wonderful Toastmasters.
They're just in it for the money.
So much.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd just do it for the
Can I say a
big
word,
bucks.
please?
And
Go, Charmaine.
don't
I would like
forget,
to thank
Wait,
Denise and Jimmy for putting this together,
Mm.
because they put a lot of work into this tonight, and I have learnt so much from everybody by asking my questions that I have. You know, so thank you, Denise, and thank you, Jimmy, for putting this together. And also thank you, Brian and Richard, for your calm, relaxed presentations on how you answered all the questions and how you kept the presentation rolling. It was fantastic. One of the best I've ever been to that I've really enjoyed.
thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine. And don't forget, guys, we can't let this COVID situation define us.
No.
We'll be having speech contests. Do the very best you can with what you've got. And we're preparing the online, which I know probably was what's on people's minds. But if you don't know how to judge, it doesn't matter whether you're judging face-to-face or online, you really need to judge.
Yeah.
Thank you
That's
so
right.
much. And
Just
thank you,
think,
Brian.
just
Thank you,
one thought.
everybody.
Just one thought, Denise.
Yes, Dennis.
If Zoom was available in 1924, it might be a whole different world.
Mm.
True. You should do a speech on that. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, everybody. I
Thank
really
you.
Bye, our
enjoyed
pleasure.
it tonight. Bye, everybody.